part of the world. So I have this theory that as biotech becomes cheaper and more distributed, that developing countries are going to explode with it because they have the most to gain from revolutions happening on the genetic level. They're dependent on plants and natural resources. So when you start to work with those and improve them, they're going to see just the benefits immediately. Whereas
Hi everybody, welcome back to highlighting community members in the Biohacking and Genetic Engineering Design group on Facebook. Today I am here with a friend. His name is Diego Garrido, and he is right now in Bali. What's up, Diego? How's it going?
Hey Esther, it's going good.
Awesome. This is actually our first time meeting, so I'm pretty excited to chat with you. I think you've been pretty active inside of the group, and you've had some really cool projects that have come up. So I'm really excited to get to know you and understand where you're coming from. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
Sweet. So let's get started. So my first question is, what are you doing in paradise in Bali?
It is pretty amazing out here. I've always been traveling around because the stuff that I'm interested in is saving rainforests and biodiversity. So I kind of chase that around the world. And my other most important thing in my life is food. And so if you circle the places in the world with great food and great rainforests, Indonesia is like pretty tops in both sections. So it was an easy choice after I started doing my line of work.
Yeah, I've been definitely thinking about babaguling, which is roast pig that they just put on a spitfire. And man, that's all I ate in Bali and served the entire time I was there. So a little slice of paradise, pretty jealous, discovering rainforests, saving the ecology, which is pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about your work. It seems like you've been world traveling a lot. You've done research in different places in the world. Tell me, what got you started with all of that, and what made you go all the way across the world to Bali?
Well, I started studying computer engineering, but I quickly learned that I'm so mediocre at it that I wouldn't get to do anything interesting. So when I ran away to South America and saw the jungle for the first time, I started getting really into insects, and it just clicked. I was like, wow, biology. It's like, I get all the categories that I love, but I don't have to study code for 100 hours a day. So it was really the giant insects of the Amazon that really got me into bio first and foremost. From there, I kind of specialized in biospeleology. So I would explore cave systems and document the things that live inside of them. I did some research work for the Smithsonian Institution on fungus and just a lot of jungly stuff, met a lot of cool scientists. And that really, I think, put me into the bio world. But in my pursuit of the best rainforests that need the most attention, I did some work in Zimbabwe and then eventually Borneo. And Borneo, I just fell in love with, and I found so much stuff there that I was like, this is my rainforest. Also, Borneo rainforest tries to kill you a lot less than Amazonian rainforest, which is a bit endearing. It will still beat you up, but at least it won't straight up kill you, and that was really nice. And then after about 7 years in the most remote tropical rainforest on Earth, I was getting a little bit weird. And so I thought I should go someplace with more people, and maybe I can get a beer and a museum or something and not just talk to bugs. So Bali was this perfect in-between place. I am a hop and a skip from Australia, New Zealand, Papua, Borneo, basically all the cool stuff out here. It's a happy medium for me, and I'm pretty excited. I think I'm one of the few labs in this part of Indonesia, so I'm pretty excited.
Nice. That's awesome. You just got your lab started, right? So, what's kind of the rules in Indonesia for genetic engineering right now?
Genetic engineering is a good question. It's not been completely covered, but we always pay on the safe side. My lab started 2 years ago with what I think is the perfect excuse to start a lab, which is a mushroom business. So a mushroom lab is an easy lab to make, and it gives you a stepping stone to keep doing other stuff while still producing stuff. So we started a mushroom company. Now we were growing lots of mushrooms last year. Then, and I was doing plant tissue culture and other stuff then as well. But then after Corona hit, there's not restaurants buying mushrooms anymore. So it was a good time to switch over into complete GM mode. And yeah, as we're becoming more formalized and getting all our licensing in place, it's kind of becoming a little clear as to how genetic engineering works out here. Cool fact, in most of the global south, you cannot patent a plant, which is very cool. They are like a gift to mankind. Yes, it's great. So no patents work on plants out here. You can patent like bacteria, but and this is true in India, most South America. Really, the only developing countries that got shafted on that were the countries of Africa, because they have a lot of very strong property laws for biotech. So that was cool. So that was like the first thing I learned. I was like, wow, I get to break some patents, which is super fun. And potentially help. This is an agricultural part of the world. So I have this theory that as biotech becomes cheaper and more distributed, that developing countries are going to explode with it because they have the most to gain from revolutions happening on the genetic level. They're dependent on plants and natural resources. So when you start to work with those and improve them, they're going to see just the benefits immediately. Whereas in first world countries, you have so much industry and stuff that maybe our level of benefit is a little more removed as a society. It's why I think one of the reasons that people have such a hard time having positive associations with GM, because your average person, like how often does anybody farm to the extent that you would notice the 5% improvement from your crops? Like it's just like not a good sell. Whereas you tell it to a rice farmer here, you have 5% with no fertilizer. And he's like, oh yeah, I immediately see that benefit and like want to get involved. So I kind of forgot the question now.
Yeah. So, you have an interesting perspective and it's very different than just like a traditional biohacker here in the United States. We're always here thinking about like, ooh, how do we enhance ourselves to become more cyborgy, or how do we, genetically modify ourselves to like go into Mars or something like that. And so we're approaching genetic engineering on a different scale than you. We're not thinking about feeding an entire nation with genetic engineering. And that's something that you are interested in, which is like, helping develop and saving the ecology, which is like on the brink of extinction, right? And you're in the remote parts of the world, like trying to preserve, what's left and like make them better. So, my question is to you, what are some of the cool projects that are you immediately working on to impact just like your community around you in Bali or Indonesia?
Well, so we're a tissue. Yeah. We're a tissue culture lab here. So on the most immediate effect that we have, is I work with a lot of great Indonesian scientists, and they're more in touch with the agricultural sector. So a part of our business is always just like tissue culturing plants that are needed in this area that we just don't have the diversity of the right varieties, and just you can't get enough. Because I tell people, if you want 50 plants, not a big deal. You can pick that up from some nurseries or something. But if I want like 10,000 of something, where do you get that? And especially if you need a good variety. So that's a really interesting project. I think tissue culture of plants in general is the future. And me and a lot of people like Sebastian, who does great work, are doing a lot of work to make it more accessible. So I would say like an interesting project that we work a lot on is just straight tissue culture plants. It's a really cool idea. Turn one plant into millions. And as a platform, it allows you to do so many things because you no longer have to rely on things like true breeding seeds for when it decides to make seeds. Or if I can only get one of this very special variety, like it's going to take years for me to plant that up traditionally. So I think that's really cool. And if you go on the Pedal Smith Facebook group, you see we're always talking about tissue culture and how to make it easier. And we're like reverse engineering stuff. So hopefully within like a few years, tissue culture should be like home gardening, where we can just have people do it. And then from there, genetic engineering becomes this amazing doorway, because now I can genetically engineer one plant and just have as many of it as I want, which is really cool. So that's like the first project. It's pretty much just straight tissue culture. And the second one builds on that. And that is actually where we improve parts of plants' photosynthetic process sometimes they're morphology. In agriculture, it's pretty simple. You want more food. So you do stuff that makes more food, and it makes them also more hardy. So for example, halo-tolerant crops, we're trying to design plants that can take seawater as irrigation. And there's some really cool gene circuits out there. But if you can do that, then all of a sudden you can irrigate and grow crops in places that were deserts before, because you can just use the seawater. Mangrove ecosystems are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world because they're great, but they suck to live around and they have firewood. But so what if we did things like make palm oil plants that could grow like mangroves, which is totally possible. Then you have all the benefits of a mangrove ecosystem, because a mangrove is structural. It doesn't really matter so much the species. It just has to have a lot of little nooks and crannies and mud and leaves and trees, and all the animals will come. So if we start imagine surrounding the coast of our tropical countries with these like palm oil mangroves, it's win-win for everybody. And so that's a project that's really near and dear to my heart, is specifically trying to find ways to mitigate the problems of palm oil out here. And then other things are more getting endangered species that reproduce very slowly or grow very slowly, and making them better. There's no reason they should grow so slowly. They just never had a reason to grow fast in their evolution. So we're just kind of kicking them in the butt with few SPB base, maybe some metabolic workarounds to make life easier for them. And, you know, if you do this, the idea would be that we can take these plants that fruit once every 100 years and have them fruit every 3 years, you know, and they might look a little different, but that 1 million year genetic history is still going to be there. And I think that's what's really like important to me, that it's not going anywhere, even if we really fuck it up, which we are.
Right.
So yeah, so I think it's important for people to think about environmental problems that are happening in their ecozone. You know, what are the causes? Who's actually doing the destruction there, and how do you mitigate that? And what are the most important species that used to be in your area that aren't really there anymore? Because yeah, okay, you should start growing them in your garden, just like the butterflies and the bugs. But let's make them better, because they're clearly not cutting it. Like, they're not there anymore. So yeah, so and analyzing where you are and what did the forest where you live used to be like? Because I think a lot of people don't ask themselves that, and they would be blown away if they knew what the world would have looked like 10,000 years ago. And obviously, don't think we can hit that exactly, but maybe we can spread out the diversity a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're trying to get these toolkits for the plants to make them grow better and faster, and we hope that these can be applicable to lots of people's ecozones. So we're always looking for people who are interested in trying to restore fundamental parts of their ecology.
Cool. You know, I'm going to ask you a really hard question because I think it's important to address it. And, you know, we look at the biodiversity, you know, in these like domes or whatever, and they're quite sensitive to any sort of change in their environment, especially since climate change has been like devastating forests and whatnot, and you know, just changing like the biodiversity of everything, right? So, you know, with genetic engineering, how can we keep that balance maintained without having just like crazy repercussions of like, you know, like let's say we made a really hardy like a really hardy tree that like grows really fast and it produces lots of seeds and like it's a fantastic tree, but it over time becomes like, what if it becomes an invasive species? Like, how do we think about all of those steps, like 20 steps before it actually happens? Like, what's kind of your thought process on that?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. And those are almost I know it's a bit controversial, but those are the kind of things we need to be asking. And so my answer to that is basically, let's not look at what, you know, this world that's perfectly in balance. And you're right, species take a really long time to balance each other out. And when you disturb that balance, that's when you get invasive. And the question is that you're asking, like, how do we make any changes in that without knowing what's going to cascade out of those changes? So the first thing is to look at what's actually happening. And so what's actually happening is not a well-balanced ecosystem. We have a new invasive every day from a different part of the world. So there's already a billion invasives. So like, if the worst case scenario is that we make one more invasive, like, yeah, okay, that's not great, but that literally happens all the time. So it's not like something to stop you from even attempting a project. On the other hand, especially if you look at places that are very vulnerable to climate change and deforestation, there is no future. There is nothing there in a real sense that can be destroyed. It's not like we're worried that we might be moving towards a place with no biodiversity. We know it. We have lots of data. And so we have these guaranteed outcomes. Now, this is not everywhere in the world. There's still like pristine areas, national parks, great idea, but they're not everywhere. So in these vulnerable places, when you make these arguments, like, you have to wonder, well, what am I actually going to be doing worse than just bad soil scrubland where a forest used to be? So I think we need to keep that in our back of our minds, what we're actually doing. This isn't like the best solution all, because we're messing with stuff that's very complex, but the planet's ecosystems are dying. This is a Hail Mary path that we can try to preserve something over a long enough time span that we can have something to leave to future generations. So yeah, like I said, the smallest tweaks that you can do for the most biodiversity is what we're looking for. You know, if you can just change 2 species out of an ecosystem to produce more fruit, and that fruit abundance is enough to keep the local mammals and insects and birds alive, then that's good. And you did it. You increase the biodiversity to the level it should be at. So I think we need to take that attitude in a lot. But I also think it's very easy to just be like, whoa. We don't know everything that's going to happen. So let's just like not do anything for 10 years and just do endless studies. And unfortunately, this isn't a field that can do that because things disappear so quickly. We don't have the luxury of this time and testing, which we do. I mean, the luxury would be not having to do this at all, right? And in a perfect world, we would stop cutting down the forest and countries and governments would take responsibility for the damage they do, but they're not. So somebody has to take up something. And I'm interested to find what's the ethical way to do this in each area. And I don't think I should be telling what Central African scientists, what they should be doing to preserve their ecosystem. I don't think that Europeans and North Americans should be telling, you know, Papuans and Dayaknese how they should be preserving their ecosystems. We need to give people toolkits and let them decide how they want to do it and rely on autonomy and scientific community, right? To find out what's the best way forward, even if we're not totally sure.
That is such a perfect answer to that question because, you know, as biohackers, we always think about the ethical implications, probably actually way more than industry scientists. You know, they claim that, oh, I'm like, I got this passed through like ethics and, you know, IRB board and whatever. And it's like, well, did you though? I think biohackers are more conscious about, you know, what they're doing like with themselves and the environment with like genetic engineering. So I think we're really poised to start projects like these. And like you said, build an infrastructure and toolkits so we can learn about, you know, agro and like, you know, food tech, like, right? Could you imagine, you know, solving a problem in your small area that, you know, you could save your entire population from like starvation? Or, you know, influence like all of the, you know, flora and fauna to come back to like a once dead zone of like an area of the forest.
Definitely.
Like that would be super cool. So yeah, I think what you have is a really fantastic cause that we can all get behind because corporate's not interested in like saving the rainforest at all. It's not in their agenda. So I think it's up to citizen scientists and biohackers, all like us, to kind of look around what's in our biodiversity and figure out, oh, you know, what's coming and going and how can we change or mitigate climate change? You know, I think these are all important things that we should always think about. Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, Diego. It was really fantastic to, you know, chat with you about the ecosystem and saving the planet this way. I think this is truly, you know, biohacking the planet. Like I really love your work. And, you know, I hope to come one day to Bali. I think that would be super cool and just like do a couple of research things there with you. Yeah. But
absolutely. I mean, we're not like a community biolab, technically, but everybody who does biology in Bali is welcome in the lab. So we all just kind of end up working on interesting projects. So yeah, if anybody's around this part of the world, come on by. We always got cool stuff going down and we'll get you on some tea trees.
Yeah, we could eat some baba guling together. That'd be really awesome. All right, so check Diego's lab out. It's called Cultiva Life Sciences. It will be in the links below. And if you're interested in contributing to his lab or his cause, there is going to be also a Bitcoin link because, you know, we're 2021 and we also have Bitcoin. So, you know, be sure to contribute to that. And with that said, you know, get in touch with me if you want to pitch a proposal to me or join the Facebook group, you know, surrounding the biohacking and genetic engineering design group. And yeah, I will see you next week. Thanks so much, Diego. Take care.
See ya, Esther.
Bye. Yeah.